The story follows a PhD candidate at Cambridge University, and her area of study is magic, of course.
Okay.
Yep. Kofi like that. And then, get this, her dissertation advisor dies and goes to hell.
Oh, wow.
And she really wants to finish her dissertation. So she goes to hell to get him.
Okay, all right. I'm seeing it come together.
Yeah.
The whole
Hi, everybody. Welcome back from the summer. And summer feels like, I don't know, like a year ago.
Yeah.
Not just months ago. So welcome back to Bookish. I'm Laura Yu, and I'm here with my friends Sylvia Lee and Kofi Adisa. So this episode, we're going to be reporting back on how we did with our summer reading plans. If we completed our challenges or had to pivot our challenges or didn't complete our challenges. So I'm going to go to my left and go with Kofi. How'd you do?
Well, I had 5 things that I was gonna read.
Okay.
Now, I have read 5 things, but only 2 of them are on this list. So The Q by Bassam Abdul Aziz, I think it's Aziz, sorry. That was a very interesting book considering the time that we're living in, and it's predicated on this gate in which people have to line up and stand in queue, basically, and to get all kinds of services or any kind of thing that you need. And part of this is a response to some civil unrest in this Middle Eastern community. Now, other people who are critics of the book say that it's basically the Arab Spring that they're talking about, but it's been fictionalized to the degree in which people, for anything, they have to stand in line and wait for the gate to open for them to get their services. And so one of the characters got shot during the civil unrest. And he needs the bullet extracted from him. But in order to extract it, that would mean the government had to acknowledge there was an unrest. And so he goes through all of these trials and tribulations just to remove a bullet in his stomach. I won't tell you how that ends. But you could probably figure it out. Exit West by Mohsin Hamed. That was a book I read before. And essentially it's about... And you've probably seen either movies or read stories about these doors that open up into another portal somewhere. It's sort of the same theme, except, again, there's civil unrest and they're trying to avoid this unrest. And every place they go to is worse than the last place. And then they finally reach a place that's really, really good. And it becomes kind of like a tragic story because it's a couple. But then the girlfriend decides, like, you know what? I kind of like being here. You could keep going through those doors, but I'm going to pretty much stay here. And so then it becomes a different kind of text. Because at first it's like, you know, they're running away from something. And then it seems like it becomes someone settling for something. So it's a really good book. It's again, I reread it and it's good. But I also read it very early in this process. So I'm being very vague for reasons that are obvious. Because then I pivoted to Varhani Vara's Searches, which is nonfiction. And it's about her exploration in 10 years of search history, which I don't even know if I have 10 years of search.
Her own search history
for 10 years because she never...
That's fascinating.
Yeah, it is. And some of the things that she looked up, she... puts in these different chapters, and there's sort of mini chapters or micro chapters along with larger chapters. It's a fascinating read, and it searches into something about selfhood. And so she's kind of looking within her identity of
is this like a memoir or
it's
series of essays?
Okay. Kind of creative nonfiction. I would put it in that boat.
I'm going to check that one out.
It's a very thick book.
Okay. Oh, really?
Yeah, so
10 years of search history.
Yeah, I guess it would be. But it's not a book that I'm reading linearly. I kind of read around.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay.
So I know what she was thinking about at a certain time. Yeah.
But it's fascinating, the concept, because I never thought of the search history almost being like this sort of archive of like where you were at or like what was on your mind, either in a major or small way, like insignificant way. But I wonder if she's looking at patterns of things during certain times.
And I think it's also coinciding with the death of her sister who died from cancer. And so, it's pretty traumatic.
Yeah.
And she's technically, I guess, a millennial. So I don't know if you ever seen that commercial with the young man who grew up with Google. Mm-hmm. So she's kind of like that.
I see.
Yeah. So that is, and I think the other two books, one is Teaching Change, rather, by Jose Antonio Bowman. I agree with a lot of things he says, but I disagree with a lot of things he says, which I guess is a good book. And the other one that I haven't read yet, but I still have it, is Ruhan Benjamin's Imagination. I was going to read that, and I'm still going to read it.
That's also my to read in the future list. Yeah.
All right, so since I started us off.
Well, they're both looking at me. Okay, well, I read everything on my list except I did not get to Emergent Strategy. That was on purpose because I, too, made a pivot at the last minute. But I do want to spend most of my airtime talking about one of the books I did read, which was Bright Red Fruit by Safia Elilo. And I wanted to talk about that one because she will be here in like 2 weeks at Howard Community College as our Bowder lecturer, featured author. And her book, Bright Red Fruit, is the Howard County Book Connection book for this year. And so I'm doing a little bit of a plug there. I don't know if this episode will air in time for that, but if you didn't catch her or if you caught her and didn't read the book yet, hopefully this conversation will be helpful to you. This book, was on my list. It was a very quick read in the sense that it's written in several short poems. And it's a novel in verse, much like last year's Book Connection book by Elizabeth Acevedo. And this one focuses on a young Sudanese-American teenager who's an emerging poet, is really passionate about poetry, but she comes from a culture and a family home dynamic that is very strict, I guess, is one way to put it. And so the book sort of talks about like the hyper surveillance on the body for young women in certain societies and cultures. And there's a lot of references made throughout the book to the Greek or the classical myth of Persephone. A lot of people are familiar with that story, right? How Demeter's daughter was kidnapped and then taken to the underworld and ate the fruit and had to stay and all this other stuff. But the book kind of calls out, like, where's Persephone's thoughts in all of this? You never hear her thoughts. And so it takes a little bit of that role in explaining what the daughter is thinking, because the protagonist of this novel is the daughter. And it's interesting, when I first read it, I was like, it's not really my, but the more I thought about it, the more I really appreciated what the author was doing. And it's set in D.C. It's a D.C.-based story, and the author also grew up in the D.C. metro region. And it reminded me of a friend of mine from high school, actually, who grew up in a very strict Asian household. She was also the only daughter, and she would call me on the phone after school because we were good friends. But it would be very odd because she'd call me, she'd be like, hey, I only have like 10 minutes to talk. Well, my mom's at the grocery store. She thinks I'm doing my homework in my room because we didn't have cell phones back then. And I remember at the time thinking, like, dang, that is not a way to live, I don't know how you are existing that. But it reminded me of that because I think in the book, you are perplexed if you're not from that culture or familiar with it. And their characters, both her friends, but within the culture, but also outside the culture, who don't quite understand, why can't you just call me on the phone? Why don't you challenge your mother in that way? And I don't think it's that easy. And And of course, there's a little like love story as well. That's a little simplistic to call that. But the major conflict in there is that she starts to, fall in love with this other poet. It's the first red flag there, male poets. I'm just going to put that out there, male poets have some issues, man. Just going to put that out there. And he's not all he's cracked up to be. But she starts to keep these secrets, and she can't stop keeping these secrets once she has one because of the strict way in which she's, being brought up. So it's really interesting. I think the author does a really great job with bringing you into the conflict where you're like, oh, you're so frustrated with the protagonist. Like, this is really boneheaded. But then at the same time, from a young teenage girl's perspective, you might be able to understand why she feels the way she does and how she's trying. So I thought it overall, if it was a young adult, I would classify it as a young adult fiction. And if I was a young adult or teenager especially, I think I would appreciate this book a lot. So I'm curious at the Bowder lecture, what she's going to say about the book and what our students are going to ask her about writing this book and what that's like. I imagine there will be a lot about sort of that censorship. Kind of related to that, one of the other books I read this summer was a collection of poetry by Emily Jungmin Yoon called Find Me as the Creature I Am. And I feel like now that I'm talking about it, they sort of speak to each other because in that book, there is also this focus on like the policing of women's bodies and like the way that you as a woman begin to self-police that or begin to like shape your understanding of your relationships based off of how other people understand your body to function in the world. And so her opening poem is a love poem. It's a meditation on love, and it starts off with the idea of a horse. And you're like, where is this going? But it's so beautiful. Each poem is like achingly, beautifully written. And there's poems that have to do with violence against the body. And even those are just like, it's never like super in your face. It's not heavy-handed. It's never heavy-handed. And I appreciated that but it's still like, it gets you, but it doesn't sink you in a way. Bluff by Dennis Smith, however, on the other hand.
Heavy-handed?
A bit. I mean, have you ever heard Dennis Smith do anything? He is a very outgoing, flamboyant guy. He's just all energy. He's got really interesting, charismatic energy. At least when I've seen him perform, very much in the tradition of slam poetry. And he's just, funny and raucous and things like that. This collection, much like Homie, which was one of his other collections, is very energetic and vibrant, but this one felt more chaotic, unhinged, only because he's experimenting in a lot more in this collection. I was shocked at how it's probably not fair to compare it to Homie, but I was shocked at how big the book was. And for a book of poetry, you don't really, unless it's a collection, it's not usually super thick, but I was just shocked at how much writing.
I see.
How much there was in it. Yeah.
many words.
Yes and no, because some poems didn't. Some poems did. Some poems were prose style. Some poems were form. And there's one poem and it's just a giant QR code. Yeah. So that's what I mean. He takes a lot of different twists and turns with it. And I felt like he was trying to play with form and trying to experiment, try all these things. And there was something quite nice about that. It wasn't boring, but it was almost a little it was so opposite from Emily Jungmin Yoon that I just had to put it down midway because I was it's too much. It's zigging and zagging and twisting and turning. And I just needed to just kind of breathe a little bit.
Breathing is good.
Yeah. And then in August, I was like, you know what? I'm just going to put this away for now.
Yeah.
Come back to it in the dead of winter when I need a little, pizzazz.
Oh, interesting. There's seasons for books, right?
Yeah.
Different seasons for different types of books.
Ocean Vuong, I wanted to read The Emperor of, Emperor of Gladness? Is that his new book? I wanted to read that one, but then I realized I feel like that's a winter book.
Yeah, I think that's also heavy is what I'm hearing.
That's why, yeah.
And
How about you, Laura?
Well, I'm going to start with Dennis Smith too, because I didn't read it and it was on my list. And I think it was that my prior experience with Smith's work is I anticipated heaviness, like, like I need to be like fully in, and, Homie did that to me, the other collection. So it's like still on my bedside table. Like every day I look at it and it's a really interesting cover. But so I'll get to it probably this winter. So my big accomplishment for the summer is that I had Cutting for Stone by Abram Verghese on my list. And it was my long read for the summer. It was like almost 700 pages. And that's a story about twin brothers, Marion and Shiva Stone. That's where the name comes from. Mm-hmm. And they're born in India, and it's around sort of medicine, doctors and hospitals. And basically their mother dies. That happens early on, so I don't feel like that's like a secret. And then the father, who they think is the father, kind of disappears. And this long journey of trying to, who is the father? Is he the father? And what happened to them? And who are they? And I think now I'm like second guessing myself, but I think that they end up in Ethiopia. The main character, Marion, ends up being a doctor, and he's in Ethiopia and then comes to America. So it's like a very long family saga, right? And folded into that is these like really interesting conversations about medicine and especially women's health. The woman who ends up raising them is a gynecologist. And so a lot of the like examples of the patients that they meet and the goings on at the hospital have to do with women's health and sort of the autonomy of the women's body and things like that, and sort of weaving in history. So it really, for like such a long book, it really did keep my attention, and I was so happy to finish it early on. So it was really good. I recommend that book. And the author was recently in the news again because he gave this amazing commencement speech at, I think, Harvard, maybe Harvard Medical School or something this past graduation season, I think. So great book. I really, really loved it. And like, I think I'm liking this whole like long book thing.
Yeah. I
was not like a fan of big books before, but I am almost done with There by Tommy Orange. And that's a very interesting book. Like it almost reads like collection of short stories, but in that each chapter is a different set of characters, but they're all converging at the same big moment later in the book at a big powwow in Oakland. So it's, I guess, what they call like urban Native American story, this book. So you're kind of following these different groups of characters, and you find out that some of them are related somehow, but they're going to converge at the end at this location. And something's going to happen. So I didn't quite finish, but I'm almost done, and I'm looking forward to finishing that. So my like pivot was I read this book called I Who Have Never Known Men. It's hard to say. I Who Have Never Known Men by Jacqueline Hartman. And I think it's a translation. And it was published in 1995. So it's not like a new book, but it was fascinating. I mean, I could not put it down. It opens with this girl. She wakes up or something. Like we're following this girl, and she wakes up and they're in a bunker, and it's just women, like group of 40 women or something like that. And the whole book is, and it's not a long book, and the book is finding out who they are, how they got there, what is this about, and then it sort of spirals into big like philosophical questions about like, what does it mean to be human? Like, how do you know who you are in relation to other people? What's important? What is love? And it just captivated me. And I think it's one of those books I read in like one sitting or two sittings or something. It's fascinating. I highly recommend it, especially sort of that element of like world building, but like it's such a mystery too. So there's like a lack to the world building because they're trying to maintain the mystery for the reader as well.
Reminds me of the Parade, yes.
Yes, very much like that. Like you are thrown into a situation, you're trying to figure out what's going on and who these people are. So, and there's sort of like mixed reviews about this book. Some people just love it, and like the way I'm talking about it, and some people found it not satisfying, right? Like if they were looking for specific kinds of answers, I'm not sure that they got that.
Yeah.
The last book I read, technically, I guess, is summary because I read it over Labor Day weekend.
Sure.
Still counts.
Yeah, still counts. Is okay. I had to learn how to say this word, catabasis. I keep wanting to say catabasis, but apparently it's catabasis, and it's Greek, which means descent or journey downward. And it's a new book by R.F. Kuang, she's a fantasy writer, right? And dark academia, I think, is sort of the genre that she writes in. So I picked it up at Costco.
Which guarantees
yes,
it's going to be good.
I was like, I just wanted to see what all the hype is about. I mean, the hype around this book.
I know. I've seen so much like interview, like I'm actually surprised whoever's doing the marketing for this.
I know, so good. Like, and not only that, like months before, there are these test copies out there, right? These numbered copies, like 1 out of 50 or whatever they are. And these people will get on TikTok or different social media to talk about the book, and it actually sort of generated all this buzz around reading Greek mythology and all these sources that she's going to reference in the book, right? So all these people are reading like classical literature, the fans of R.F. Kuang, to get ready for the release of this book. And I did not do any of that, but I was still able to. Basically, the story follows someone who is a student at a PhD candidate at Cambridge University, and her area of study is magic, of course.
Okay.
Yep. Kofi like that. And then her
satire of academia. I see.
Her dissertation advisor dies and goes to hell.
Oh, wow.
And she really wants to finish her dissertation. So she goes to hell to get him.
Okay. All right. I'm seeing it come together.
Yeah.
The whole classical myth.
And again, this was like a pretty big book, long book. And I sat for like maybe 2 days and just read it.
And you read through the whole thing in 2 days.
I mean, it was like, and I think, again, this is another book where some people really didn't like it. Yeah. They're calling her like overrated, If you go into it with no expectation but to be entertained, right? And like kind of laugh at these like jokes that she's making about academia. I thought it was so fun to read. Like it was entertaining. Like it's not that serious.
That's kind of the vibe I got, which is I was like, I am kind of interested in this one. I've never been really interested in her other books, but when I saw the interviews and all the stuff, I was like, I would read that one.
Yeah.
And I'm just really impressed with how like prolific she. Like, how do you write that much? Like, I feel like she's just. And I'm going to law school or something like that.
So I think she now has like a degree from Harvard, Oxford, and when she was at Oxford, I think she wrote Babel, which is the other her really famous book. So of course, because I thought Catabasis was so entertaining, I got myself a copy of Babel, and now I'm going to read that. And
let me borrow your copy of Catabasis.
Yes, you should. Don't buy another copy at Costco. We love Costco, but you can borrow my copy.
It was probably on sale.
Yeah, it was.
It was probably on sale.
Anyway, so I felt like I rounded out the summer, on a fun note in terms of reading, and I do want to read the Bowder book. What is it called again?
Bright Red Fruit.
Yeah, I do want to read that before the author comes, I think on the 18th or 17th or something.
It's a pretty quick read. I think you'll be able to do it.
Yeah, so we did it, guys.
We sort of did it.
I think the whole point of reading is the journey. Right?
I agree.
You pivot, you take detours, you really pursue and chase that rabbit of like, what is it that's interesting to you? So, and that can change at any given time. So it's the spirit of curiosity.
It is, which Jose Bowman talks a lot about in building up that curiosity, not only within ourselves, within our students. And that kind of curiosity may lead to students not using generative AI. He doesn't make that point.
One can hope.
One can hope. But I think I know for me, sometimes if I'm hearing the author talk about his or her work, and then they give me his or her work, then I feel compelled to read it. And then I put everything else on the side. And that's what happened with Vaharni.
I
Vaharni
see. Yeah.
Laura, she gave me the book. She didn't sign it, but she gave me the book. And I was like, okay, I'll start reading it. And I did. It was quite enjoyable.
Oh.
I don't know if I would have taken some of the risks I think she took, but I thought it was a really good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if I could talk about the death of my family. I don't think I'm there yet.
I see.
But, geez, you guys, it took a turn, huh? It took a turn, huh? I just think I'm normal. I don't think
I think you are,
Yeah, no, I just think, I don't think she's abnormal, but I think,
Well, she's reached a depth of like being able to overcome that like whatever you want to call it, censor
different
or
kind of process.
Yeah. She's chosen to go, and that's a very difficult thing to do psychologically, emotionally, mentally. It's why not everybody is a creative nonfiction writer about their traumas, because you really have to sink to a level of transparency and vulnerability that is very just out there. So I really admire people who do that.
I do too, which is why I started reading her book almost immediately. That was my homage to her tragedy. But other than that, I guess I should also say to our lovely fans and everything, I'm no longer a member of the Howard Community College family, but I am at Towson University as their assistant director of writing of their writing center. So I am interloping here as a podcaster and everything. But as always, I enjoy the talk of books and reading.
Yeah.
Well, congratulations.
Yes.
We'll miss seeing you here every day, but we'll do this at least once a month. So.
And I think it adds another level and layer of collaboration across higher ed institutions.
I agree.
Continue on. Well,
tune in next time.
Yes. This has been another episode of Bookish, a casual book club. And you can catch us anywhere you catch podcasts or listen to them. Until next time, this has been Sylvia, Kofi, and Laura.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed what you just heard, we have a whole universe of podcasts waiting for you. Simply search Dragon Podcasts wherever you get your podcasts. You can also explore our full lineup and discover new shows at podbean.com/dragonpodcasts. That's podbean.com/dragonpodcasts.